everybody. Welcome to another episode of Everyday Strong with Dr. Michael G. Daniels. This is your host, C.B. Baker. Thank you all for showing up and supporting us. It's been years. This is like episode 120, and we don't do them back to back. So 120 is really it spans a lot, a long time. So today's subject, Dr. Daniels, is church versus state. And we're going to really be talking about, has the church suffered or benefited from the separation of church and state? Now, we've changed the format a little bit here. This is going to be another debate type scenario. Dr. Daniels is going to take the side of the church, and I'm going to take the side of the state. So, Dr. Daniels, has the country benefited from the separation of church and state?
I would have to say no, that we are in a horrible position because of our separation. Now, and I understand why, that people say you want to keep those things separate. But if you look at what's happened, for example, just a small thing, when the Supreme Court ruled that you could not have prayer in schools anymore. I grew up in an era where, you did devotions every morning when you in school, and you did the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and you had prayer, and of course, that was outlawed in the 60s, no more prayer in school. And if you think of where schools have gone since that time, it's just been horrific.
Right.
The transformation of schools and how people respond and how children respond to things, because educating the mind without educating the soul, to me, that doesn't have the same impact on people. It's not enough just to know that 1 + 1 is 2. You also need to have some type of morality, as you're growing up. And that's been lost now, and teachers are feeling that now, that, the idea that kids have no respect for them because they don't see that there is any consequence of a higher power to keep them in check.
So, okay, and my point of view is what the state's point of view is. You shouldn't want to shove religion down the throats of people that may not want it. So even though if you have a classroom of, let's say 20 kids,
Mm-hmm.
and 2 of those kids that 20 does not want to have any religious things going on in the class.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's their right. They shouldn't have to be forced to do that. And with the country as a whole being a Christian country,
Mm-hmm.
if those kids was Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
they would also have even more issues with it. So therefore, if you take the church out of the classroom, it makes it equal for everybody in the room.
Well, not necessarily, because I don't have a problem with having prayer for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, why couldn't the Muslim pray and the Christian pray, and
What about the atheists?
the atheists can pray too? Or they can just have a moment of silence then, I mean, here's the thing that I look at now. You can force me to do the Pledge of Allegiance,
Mm-hmm.
but everyone that is an American does not feel like America has benefited them. See,
Okay.
I don't have an allegiance to a flag. I don't.
Right.
But yet, when I was in school, I was forced to say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, and blah, 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 blah. Let's face it. I'm going to tell you right now, the only corps that I was willing to join was not the Marine Corps, not the Army Corps, but Boone Farm Apple Corps. That's how I felt.
Right.
Right? Because when I was growing up, it was like, why would I go fight for a country that wouldn't even fight for me? Why would I go put myself on the line for people that hated me? my thought process back then was, them folk over there don't call me nigga. It's the people over here that call me nigga, right?
Right.
So I'm just saying is that, to me, you force me to do that. So if you can force me to do that, which really has no bearing on my morality, but at least if I pray, it does do something. And let's say if only 80% of the kids are Christian, right? That's 80% of the kids that might not fight, that might not curse the teacher out. But right now you have total chaos in the class.
But now if you look at the history of why there's a difference, why there's a separation of church and state in the first place. Because historically, when the church was ruling everything, the church itself was the government, you know, in the Middle Ages and things like that, which, European, we're not going to talk about what happened in Africa, but in European standards, the church was the state. And it over time, it started separating.
Well, I said differently. Because we have a monarchy, right? European Western culture, you have monarchies. So I won't say the church was the state. I'll say the monarchy adopted religion.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because the king wasn't the Pope.
Right.
But the king just adopted religious practices.
But
I won't say he adopted them. I say this, he allowed religious practices because the king was chasing more women than anybody else. Right. Like
But the Pope did have like a major influence over what the king did and didn't do.
Well, yes. I'm going to say this. It depends on what era you're in, obviously, right?
Right. Because more popes had more influence than other popes.
Right. If you think about for example, in Western Europe, right, they pulled away from Catholicism. That's why we have the King James Version of the Bible, because they pulled away from Catholicism. But granted, in other areas, you're right. They did. What we know is this. Our tort law, and you're right, I'm not saying you're not right. Our tort law, right, is based on the Bible. Yeah, right. I agree with that. Our tort law is based on the Bible. So in a sense, even today, our laws are based on biblical principles.
Right.
So that's still there, right? It's still working. So.
But is some of those laws outdated?
Yes, but they worked back then. So they.
So that's what my argument is with the state is, if the separation between church and state, at least the state has the ability to change with times where the church might not be able to do that because they're more rigid in tradition. Well,
actually, the church does change, though. For example, the Pope just agreed to accept same-sex marriage.
Yeah, I saw that.
So the Pope is moving faster than the religious right in the United States of America. Right. But here's the thing. Look at it this way too. All right. You like money, right?
Yes.
I like money. Right. And here's what we see on every dollar bill is printed, "In God we trust." Right. Now, how can we say that the backbone of our economy, which is money, we say "In God we trust," but then say we don't trust God enough to allow that religious background to still guide us? When we get in trouble, what do we always hear? Pray for the nation, right? 9/11, what do we hear from President Bush? Pray for the nation, right? So in time of trouble, they want us to pray for the nation. They want to bring the religious leaders together. And they don't just say bring the Christian religious leaders together. They say they want the faith-based community to come together when we have a problem. When we don't have a problem, they don't want us at all. See, that's my thing, is that either you want me in times of good and times of bad, or don't call on me when it get bad.
Right. Now I will say this. One of the things that I can honestly say with the separation of church and state, that has really caused a country issues is a polarization right now with the country. Because at least with America, everybody usually had the same common thing that they liked or they was agreeable on, which was church, and the type of religion. And then now here in America, they pride themselves on the freedom of religion. So it's not just Christianity, it's the freedom of religion, even though just like, with racism and things like that, you don't necessarily see it as much like with Muslims, the acceptance of that.
Right.
But the idea of America was, freedom of religion. Now I can say that with the separation, I honestly can say that is probably part of the reason why we're going through what we're going through now, because people are not like acting as if they're Christians or Muslims with a religious background.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
They're not acting like that. They're not portraying what you're supposed to be when you're following those teachings.
Right. And I'll tell you, I think that separation, and maybe the way we do it, maybe let me say it that way. Maybe it's the way we do separation of church and state, because the way we do it has been detrimental. For example, think about like the Affordable Care Act, just if you look at that, for example. Under the Affordable Care Act, because the religious right have said we have separation of church and state, and they want that, right? They said, therefore, they don't think that it should cover birth control. They don't think it should cover, abortion. They don't think it should cover, those type of things. See, to me, that has been detrimental to us, and not only that, think about things like right now with worship, right? Think about what our current president is saying, that because we have separation of church and state, that the state should not be able to tell churches they can't worship, that you have a right to worship. So you have a right to congregate. I should say it wrong, because they don't say right. Worship. You have a right to congregate. That separation and them saying you have a right to congregate is causing people to die, of COVID-19. Now, why should my right to congregate be in a church be any different than my right to congregate in a football field? Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, see, to me that doesn't make sense. That's why I'm saying I think that idea of the separation, people abuse it and use it to their own power, because the bottom line is I don't need to go to church to worship. I just don't.
Right.
You can worship from your house. Now, is there an added benefit of going to church to worship? Absolutely. Right. Because you need a worship leader to guide you at times. But the Bible says, forsake not the assembling of the saints. So certainly the Bible wants us to come together. But by the same token, they have done it to the point where it can be detrimental, because they don't want to socially separate in church. They're still, we don't have to wear our mask because we know God is going to protect us. And I'm not saying God won't protect you, but God ain't got a problem with you dying.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, we say stupid stuff like, well, God gonna protect me. Protect you from what? The only way to get to heaven is by dying.
Right.
So if you know God loves you, then death is just maybe come home.
Right.
But I'm just saying, so we put other people at risk. So, I mean, for those reasons, that's why I say that, sometimes I think that separation has been detrimental to the country, to our economy, and to us as individuals at times,
So what do you think? What do you think about how it's affected politicians? Has it corrupted them on the church versus state, or has it made it easier for some of them to be able to maneuver and get things done?
I think the current president is a prime example of what happens when people mentally say there should be that the separation is a valid thing. See, in times past, you wanted a president that had a moral compass, and for most of us, a moral compass comes from our connection with a higher being. Right. You fear God somehow, whatever your God, however you classify your God, you fear your God. Well, now the church, because again, granted, this is mostly on the religious right, they have come to the stance that, well, his moral compass is not something we need to deal with. You know, he can be just as devilish as he wants to be. He can lie as much as he wants to lie, because his religious background or his ability to hold fast to religious concepts doesn't mean anything. And so that separation has allowed people who have no moral compass to elevate themselves and become our leaders. I think that's horrible, you know, that they've been allowed to do it. And this is, to me, this is the worst example of what happens when someone that has no religious background becomes president. You know, this guy lies, you know, and I hate to keep harp on him too much, but he just is a prime example. Can you imagine anybody doing what he's doing right now? This guy is lying and telling people that the coronavirus, that they have ended. You know, they put out a statement yesterday that they have ended the coronavirus.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you fear God in the least bit, you couldn't put that statement out. You know, you'd be looking up, wondering about, am I going to get struck by lightning every day?
Right.
But he did, you know, for far as he's concerned, boom.
All right. So with the stimulus package that they're trying to get passed,
mm-hmm.
Did the church versus state separation in the mindset, is that really what's causing that stimulus not to get passed? Because I can't imagine if you're following religion and you know you care about people and you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do, you would go ahead and get this stimulus passed, and it'd been like no problem. It should have been bipartisan.
Absolutely. I mean, think about this now. The Senate and the Congress open every session with an invocation,
right? With
a prayer. Again, to me, when you say we got to separate the church and state, then why are you opening up legislative bodies with an invocation, right? But because it is not a sincere thing, right? I mean, you're right. How could, you know, the Bible says this, and I'm paraphrasing. You demonstrate your love of God by how you deal with the least of those that are in this world. So if we truly had people in office that really were sincere in their religious upbringing, then they would no way vote against the stimulus package that gave the most money mm-hmm. to those in need. Because in fact, the Bible teaches us that the one that giveth to the poor lendeth to the Lord, right? So that would mean I would want to give the poor folk everything I can give them, because I would see that as making God happy.
Right.
But they don't see it that way.
So capitalism is getting in the way of helping people.
Hedonism is getting in the way of helping people, because because we have taken Christ, let's face it. Oh, granted, we got several religions over here, right?
Right.
But that's not what this country was founded on. This country was founded on Christianity. Right. And so when it was founded on Christianity, that Christianity put people in a position to say, hey, listen, let's do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But when you take that out, then you don't look at doing things because it's the right thing to do. Right. You do it because it's expedient for you, you know, and what you do. You know, when Abraham Lincoln and those that were working with him decided, you know what, we need to free the slaves. You know, one of the things that there were two overriding things that if you kind of read his speeches, there were two things that caused him to make those decisions. One was the idea that blacks were human beings, and being human beings, how could you then treat them as if they were not human beings? Because that went against God's law. Right. So that was one overriding thing. The other overriding thing was that we could not have a nation divided, right? That we had to come together, right? But all that was based on biblical principles of united we stand, right? You take that away and we would still be enslaved. Right? When you take that away, you get the chaos that we're going through right now. People don't feel the need to unite. You know, actually they feel the need to separate even more.
Right. That's why I asked that question about the capitalism, because even back then with Abraham Lincoln, the whole South's argument was we're going to lose, basically money and be broke overnight.
Right.
It's still a money factor in it. And with the coronavirus response, I remember even saying it's like we could end up in a Great Depression if everything got shut down overnight. And then we'd be spending 4 years trying to dig out of this. And I was telling my wife, I was like, well, I don't know what the president's going to do. He's in a no-win situation because if he shuts the things down for like 6 months, then, it's going to tank the economy.
Right.
Major corporations are going to fail. If he leaves it open, then people are going to die. And then he chose the worst of two situations, which he tried to like balance it in between and did a horrible job at doing it. And then wasn't truthful about what was taking place, because I guarantee you that if he would have stood up and said in February what the doctors told him, that it was airborne, said, look, this is what we need to do. We want to save people's lives. Let's just shut down for 3 to 4 weeks and we'll come and revisit this. I can't tell the states what to do, but I highly recommend y'all closing things down for 2 to 3 weeks. And let's see where we're at in 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
And then nobody really blamed him for that. It's in my opinion, like capitalism got in the way. And that's what I'm saying. It's capitalism it's capitalism and the state, the state part, holding the country back from being great.
Well, I would say that I won't say capitalism holding us from being great. I would say narcissism and foolishness is holding us from being great. And here's why I say that. Here's what we know about, and I can use the coronavirus as the example, as you said, because what you said makes perfectly good sense. I just think that is Trump's narcissism that created the problem. Here's why I say that. We know that the incubation period is 14 days, right? So we know that if you're quarantined for 14 days, we can tell if you got coronavirus or not, right? We know that, right? Now people say that Trump can't do, that he can't control. He said he can't tell the states what to do. Well, on the one hand, he'll say he can't tell them what to do.
Right.
Then on the other hand, he'll say, I can tell everybody what to do.
Right.
Right. So which is it? He can't or he can. Now, there's no way you can convince me as much money as the federal government gives to each state. If he had said, listen, because he gave all that stimulus package money in the end, right? What if in the beginning he had said and been honest with them and say, hey, listen, this is what we're going to do. I know shutting your state down for 2 weeks is going to cost you X amount of dollars. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bill in place to give you that money up front.
Right.
And you shut everything down for 2 weeks, everything down for 2 weeks. Okay. If he had did that, we would have isolated everybody who had coronavirus.
Yep.
In that 2 weeks time frame. We could have took care of them people and we'd have been good to go.
Right.
The economy would have opened back up and we'd have been zooming. But when we open back up, what he would have had to done was say, listen, we know the virus is still out there. So moving forward, here's what we're going to do. Everybody wear a mask. Boom. Economy would have been booming. Because with a mask on, I can get close to you, right? They've already said I can be close to you.
Right.
So that meant I can go to the movies now. I can do everything except those things like, bars and restaurants. But I can still do it in a different way. But we didn't do that. So I'm just saying, to me, his lack of a moral compass.
Right.
And I just think if he had an ounce of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in him, an ounce of Revelations, an ounce of Genesis, Leviticus in him, he would think differently because he would have been more humble.
Right.
And not just him, those other lying people that are lying right along with him.
Right.
I just can't see how you can call yourself a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist or any other form of religion and just feel comfortable lying to people the way they lie.
What's interesting when you was talking, I was thinking about the Pharaoh and Joseph. And everybody tells a story from the perspective of Joseph. but nobody really talks about the Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to just think about if you're all powerful in that nation and you got a dream and you didn't ask people to interpret this thing for you. And it's just people talking up to you. And it's like, that don't sound right. Mm-hmm. And the guy that's in your prison comes and tells you, you know how much humility you have to listen to this person.
Right.
So even if you are voted president, you have to have some humility to understand and listen to what people are telling you.
Right.
And be like, you know what? You're right. That's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And then matter of fact, not only am I going to do it, I'm going to put you in charge of doing it. So now the back end of this, and now Pharaoh's like, I can put you in charge of doing it. So if it don't work, I got a scapegoat.
Right. Blame you.
But if it do work, hey, look I did. I hired this person to do this and everything's working out fine.
You get the credit. Every president, and you think, every president in my lifetime has had a religious person that they kept close to them.
Yep.
Okay. When Bill Clinton got in trouble with Monica Lewinsky, he was praying every day. There was you had pictures of him praying. Everyone, when Roosevelt, when wartime, they had religious leaders. Billy Graham was seen as the pastor for every president during Billy Graham's lifetime. Yep. It was always that connection, so that you still got that moral compass. This is the first president that you don't see that connection. You don't see someone there with a background where they're close to God to kind of pray with him and guide him and say, you know what, hey, listen, this is what God would have you to do. He's the only one that hasn't had that.
So is he really taking that separation between church and state to heart? Like he just wants to be state and not have any
right.
church.
That's why I say, to me, he's a narcissist. He just wants to be him. He thinks he's his own God. That's how, to me, he kind of carries it. Like he would want us to bow down to him and worship him. That's how I think he feels. And that I think that's the problem, is that, I get that there are other people that have worship differently. Okay. But here's the thing. I believe in my God.
Right.
Right. I believe that my God, wants the best for us. Right. We say, God bless America. That's our favorite saying, right? Mm-hmm. God bless America. God bless America. God bless America. Well, if I believe that, then how can I say I don't want to follow God's direction for this country?
Right.
And if I'm going to follow God's direction for this country, I cannot say, well, you know what? There's going to be a true separation of church and state, where that all decisions are made separate from the state. I can see you saying that the state cannot dictate how I worship. Right. I get that part. And I think that's what our forefathers meant when they said separation of church and state, that you can't dictate how I worship. But that don't mean you can't dictate. That don't mean that the church is excluded from legislation and all those kind of things. It just means I can't make you be a Christian. I can't make you be, a Muslim. I can't make you be that. And you have a right to worship the way you want to worship. But if I pull that out of the process totally, I'm turning the government over to the devil. And I think that's what we've done now.
So how do we get it back?
Well, first we got to get one of Satan's chief helpers out of office. So we got to get him out, because here's what we just do. People have to be honest about who they are. I don't know how Mitch McConnell can go to church on Sunday and act like a devil on Monday. Yeah, I just don't get that. So that means that some of those ministers, those pastors, got to step up. And that's who I blame. I can tell you, I blame the pastors. Look at the crowds that are around Trump. Mm-hmm. Those people probably go to church. Some of them go to church. Well, how can you, like the religious right, for example, or white nationalists who go to church, Klansmen who talk about their right to do their way to do because God, they have a God-given right to all this kind of stuff. Well, that means some pastors of those churches are teaching those wicked things. That white supremacy is all right, that you should hate folk, or you are okay to hate folk. They're just as bad as black, extremists, who say the same thing, but for different reasons.
Right.
But when you make God the reason why you're saying it, it seems to give it more legitimacy. And so I think that's a part of the problem right there, is that pastors got to come to some realizations that, hey, we got to be upfront with people.
So is that the reason why we're catching hell? It's because we're using God in a way of saying God is giving us the right to do X, Y, and Z, to act this way, and the people that are saying that are the ones that's in leadership.
I think so. I give you a quick example of why I say that we are problematics. I used to belong to a conference that was had it was interdenominational, Catholic, Jew, Baptist, so the whole gamut, white, black, whole gamut. And one of the individuals in there made a suggestion, which was, hey, listen, why don't we rotate pastors so that our congregants will, get a feel for different, the way different people worship. And one of the pastors was from a neighborhood not far from where I live at. He white guy, he raised his hand, he said, and he looked and said, let me explain something to you all. He said, I'm not trying to be difficult. He pointed to the white Catholic priest. He said, you can come to my church and preach. He pointed to another white Pentecostal preacher and said, you come to my church and preach. He pointed to me and two of the other guys there and said, if you all come, they'll fire me and they won't let you preach. Okay. Now, how is that you the pastor of the church and you haven't taught your congregants enough that they are not racist?
Right. But see, then that goes back again to he's probably protecting his pocketbook too.
Well, at the expense of going to heaven.
Is that so? Essentially, this conversation did kind of switch a little bit. Going is like has capitalist, like not the love of money, but the chase of money, I should say, or this trying to get funds gotten in the way of church being involved.
Well, I'm not. It could be. I mean, I can't say what's in his head, right? But what I can say is this: if you teach people the Bible, you don't have to teach them as your idea. Teach them the Bible.
Right.
And that will change them.
Right.
If I'm a pastor of a church, if I don't believe God can change your heart, I don't need to be the pastor of a church.
Right.
So if his thought process was, I can't teach the truth because they're going to put me out, he shouldn't have been there in the first place. Because it's not up to him to change their hearts. It's up to the Holy Spirit to change their hearts, right?
Right.
So that's what he should have been teaching, was the Bible. That's why I'm saying it, in that standpoint. So, was it because he was scared of a job? I don't know. I can tell you this though. There is another gentleman that I used to be in a conference with, who was white. Okay, pastors a church that is 99% white, and to my amazement, he has told his church that they were taking down the picture of Jesus. He said, "We're going to take it down," and the board asked him why. He said, "Because that picture is offensive to our brothers." Of course, their response was, to what brothers? And he said, to our African-American brothers. So their question was why? He said, because they know what we know and won't admit.
Right.
That Jesus was not Western.
Right.
He did not have blonde hair. He did not have blue eyes because he came from the Orient or the Middle East.
Right.
And that's not what that was like, In fact, the Bible describes Jesus. And it says he had hair like lamb's wool.
Right.
It says that he had skin like bronze or that ain't light skinned.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So he told them that, and they gave him some flack, but then they did take it down, and he said they put a nice serene picture up instead. And he had the boldness to be honest with his congregation and point it out in the Bible what the Bible says. But so it's not like you have to say, I think y'all should let black folk come in here.
Right.
It's just teach the Bible.
So we're running out of time right here. We got about a couple minutes left. So is there anything else you'd like to bring up before we close out?
I want to just harp on the same thing I've said for the last few times, that, listen, this is a very important election, as you know, and everybody else knows. And what we have to do now is this. And I'm praying that this will come to fruition. If the Democratic slate does not win by a huge margin, there's going to be havoc in this country, because there are militia that have already said they're not going to accept anything other than a Trump victory. We're going to have to be careful. We're going to have to make sure that we don't put ourselves in difficult situations. We have to get ready for a fight, not an altercation with fists and gloves, but we have to be ready for a political battle. We have to protect ourselves, because it would not surprise me if those militias were not egged on by Donald Trump to say that was an illegitimate election.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, pray for the country, pray for that we don't see that division. And let's pray that whatever happens, we can become united. Because I just fear if Donald Trump is elected, this country will be on the brink of civil disaster. If he's not elected, it's going to be on the brink of civil disaster. But at least he will have it will have what it needs to be here.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all so much for tuning in. This is your host, CB Baker. Till next time.